Detectives from the Saanich Police Department are looking for something. It's a dress. It's a pretty basic white, pink, and black pattern dress. But this dress might just be the only hope in solving a murder case. A middle-aged woman wearing that exact dress, as well as a tall man with dark hair, were seen entering 1702 De Souza Place for a house showing with 24-year-old junior real estate agent Lindsay Buziak. But 20 minutes later, no one had emerged from the house, and later, Lindsay was found lifeless in the master bedroom. The house was a crime scene, but there were no fingerprints, no DNA, no clues. Not even a fiber of clothing or a strand of hair could be found. Some suspected strangers. Some suspected the people closest to Lindsay. But the number one way to track down their prime suspect was to find that dress. Welcome to True Crime Stories. If this is your first time here, I'm your host, Ty Knotts. I post new true crime documentaries every single week, so be sure to hit subscribe to stay up to date with all of my latest cases. It's completely free. Lindsay Buziak was born on November 2nd, 1983, in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. Growing up, Lindsay was defined as kind, warm, friendly, and charming. Her dad, Jeff, was a real estate agent, and Lindsay soon followed in his footsteps. She was very outgoing, happy, and bright, and being a realtor was pretty much the perfect job for her. She made all of her clients feel safe and welcomed, and pretty much everyone spoke highly of her as their realtor. Lindsay was also in a relationship with another successful real estate agent named Jason Zylo. Jason came from a very successful and established family, and they had a real estate business. At the time of the case, 24-year-old Lindsay was really only at the start of her career, but she was very excited. She'd been showing tons of houses lately, and her career path was very quickly finding itself on an upward trajectory. She'd been meeting tons of new clients and had some really promising showings scheduled. But one particular phone call would change her life forever, and Lindsay had no idea that this showing would be her last. It was late January of 2008 when Lindsay received a call on her personal phone. Now, Lindsay had a work phone, and this was the number that she gave to her clients who wanted to reach out to her for an apartment or a house. But this particular client called on her personal phone, which not a lot of people had access to besides friends and family. So this was a bit odd, but it was nothing that screamed danger. So Lindsay picked up the phone, and the person on the other end of the line was a woman. She gave Lindsay her name, and Lindsay remembered her sounding really weird. She sounded like she had a Spanish accent, but not quite. But she didn't sound Canadian either. So Lindsay nicknamed this client the Mexicans. It's a pretty racy name choice if you ask me, but these were Lindsay's words, not mine. But the thing is, Lindsay would always write down her clients' names as well as what sort of houses they were looking for, and for several of her clients, she just wrote down little nicknames that would help her remember who was who. So this client had several requests. First, she needed a house as soon as possible. Ready to move in, no fuss, no mess. This woman told Lindsay that the couple was due to arrive in Victoria in just 2 days, and they needed a house within that time frame. When Lindsay asked about the budget, her eyes nearly bugged out. The client had a pretty hefty and more than comfortable budget for the house. She was looking for a house in Victoria for $1 million. Now, Lindsay was over the moon about this. In her mind, if she could find this client an amazing house, the commission would be insane, especially for a beginner real estate agent. For Lindsay, this client sounded too good to be true. And unfortunately, this gut feeling was right. Even though Lindsay didn't have any plausible reason to suspect anything nefarious was going on with this client, she just couldn't shake the feeling that something just wasn't right. Deals this good don't just fall into your lap, not for such a newcomer anyway. The weird fake accent, the over-the-top budget and haste, and not to mention the fact that a new client reached out to Lindsay on her personal phone, something wasn't adding up. But these clients had actually found Lindsay through one of her previous clients. That explained how they managed to get her personal phone number, but still, she was on guard. Although she was going to go forward with this showing, Lindsay did share all of her concerns with her boyfriend Jason, as well as her dad, Jeff. Jeff left the decision to Lindsay, saying that she could do whatever she wanted to do. If she felt uncomfortable, she could just turn this client down. But Jason saw nothing wrong with the client and encouraged Lindsay to go to the showing. He even assured her that he'd be there outside the house in his car so Lindsay wouldn't feel alone. Lindsay felt relieved after this talk with Jason and decided to pick a couple of houses for the client with $1 million budget. So Lindsay found a house in Saanich, and a meeting was arranged for February 2nd, 2008 at about 5:30 p.m. In no time, the day of this meeting rolled around, and it was a Saturday. Lindsay and Jason spent much of the afternoon on a lunch date at a local restaurant, and after lunch, Lindsay went home at about 4:30 p.m. to get dressed for her meeting with the client, whereas Jason went to run an errand at an auto repair shop. For some reason, the couple agreed to go to the house separately. Lindsay was on her way to the house to meet the client, and Jason was running a little bit late at the auto shop with his friend, but he was going to be there within minutes of Lindsay's arrival. Jason texted Lindsay, apologizing for running late, and told her he was on his way. The last text Jason received from Lindsay was, "Okay, I gotta go, the Mexicans are here." Jason, en route to the house in Saanich, texted Lindsay again at 5:38 saying that he was almost there, but this message wouldn't be seen by Lindsay, and she wouldn't reply to it either. Not thinking too much of it, Jason parked in front of the house at 5:45 p.m. He was actually with his friend that he had picked up from that auto repair shop. As soon as he pulled up to the front door, Jason saw a dark-haired man with his back to him standing by the door, which was wide open. Jason and his friend spent the next 10 minutes outside the house, but after a bit, Jason felt like he may have been being a bit of a nosy, interfering boyfriend, so he decided to drive the car around for a bit. And he drove to Torquay Drive, from where he could still see the house clearly and even the front door. He waited there for 10 minutes and texted Lindsay that everything looked normal to him. But like the first text, this one would go unread, and Lindsay never responded. Now, Jason had also seen the man and a woman in a white, pink, and black dress go back into the house. He claimed that nothing was alarming at this point either. After 20 more minutes, though, Jason began to worry. Lindsay shouldn't have taken this long for a house showing. He went up to the now locked front door, and through the stained glass, he saw a pair of high-heeled shoes in the hallway. They were Lindsay's shoes. They were on the floor as if she'd taken them off in a hurry. This immediately put Jason on edge. Why would Lindsay take off her shoes to show a house? This caused Jason to dial 911, while his friend ran around the back of the house to investigate. Jason tried opening the front door and even knocking on it while on the call with that operator, but to no avail. That was when Jason's friend came running from the back of the house and told Jason that there was a huge gap in the back fence and that the back patio door was open. Jason told the operator that he was entering the house and hung up the phone. Jason stood by the front door while his friend went inside from the back to unlock it. When Jason entered the home, it was silent. Where was Lindsay? He walked down the hallway, up the stairs, and came to a sudden halt in front of the master bedroom. There, Jason saw his girlfriend lying lifeless on the floor with countless injuries to her body. 24-year-old Lindsay Buziak had passed away, and that was when Jason made another call to 911, and this time he asked for emergency services and the police. The paramedics and detectives arrived shortly after, and tragically, Lindsay could not be revived. She was pronounced dead at the scene, and she had suffered more than 40 slash wounds. Further examinations revealed some pretty scary details. Lindsay had no defensive wounds on her body, not even one. This led to a very horrific conclusion that Lindsay was attacked from behind, and she didn't even know what was going to happen. It's just chilling to think about. Lindsay's gut was telling her that something was off with these new clients. These clients really were too good to be true. On top of it all, the investigators were confused. See, as far as anyone else knew, the clients were total strangers to Lindsay. It wasn't like she was friends with the client or knew them from before. So why was Lindsay attacked so viciously? The stab wounds, and staggering number of them, only cemented one thing in police's minds. The attack on Lindsay was fueled by rage, and it was personal. The perpetrator wanted to make sure that Lindsay couldn't walk out that front door again alive, and sadly, they were successful in doing so. Now, the police had one job, and that was to track down whoever attacked Lindsay and took her life on the clock. A real estate agent murdered on the quiet street of De Souza Place. This news spread across Victoria like wildfire. This was an affluent area where crimes like this just didn't happen. Real estate agents were shaken to the bone. Murderers, under the guise of clients, were out for blood. Suddenly, the job of a real estate agent didn't sound so appealing anymore. Everyone was looking at the investigators for answers. They wanted the perpetrator or perpetrators to be caught and punished. When Lindsay's family got to know about their daughter's tragic passing, it was devastating. They were in disbelief. Lindsay was at work doing what she was excited about, and now she was gone. Jeff was distraught, and he wanted justice for his daughter. The detectives first went through Lindsay's phone. Everything was normal, except for two things. First was the fact that the client called Lindsay on her personal number. This further led the investigators to believe that the client knew Lindsay. This information stuck out like a sore thumb. The second and more unsettling discovery was the fact that Lindsay's phone had made a call to a random number in her contacts. Her phone, which was a BlackBerry, had pocket dialed a random number at 5:41 p.m. The police believed this was the exact moment when Lindsay was attacked by the assailants. It is possible that somehow during the struggle, the phone had pressed random buttons that led to making a call while the phone was still in Lindsay's pocket. But this was an important clue. When the investigators later checked the lockbox of the house, the timestamp on it was 5:29. This was the time that Lindsay entered the house with the clients. Witnesses around the house also stated that they saw a man about 6 feet tall with dark hair, and a middle-aged woman with blonde hair and a pink, white, and black striped dress interacting with Lindsay outside the house. Lindsay seemed all smiles with him and shook hands with him, which led witnesses to believe they must have known each other. They even saw the three people entering the house shortly thereafter, but no one saw the clients leaving, either through the front or the back door. So this corroborated Jason's version of events when he saw the clients outside the house from his car. The next thing the investigators did was analyze the crime scene, but it wasn't much help because the killers were very smart. They left no DNA evidence, no fingerprints, or even a clue behind that could lead the police back to them. The police, as much as they didn't want to admit it, knew that the perpetrators had planned Lindsay's murder extremely well. The investigators talked to Lindsay's friends and family about her having any enemies or people that would want to hurt her, but that also came up with no results. Lindsay didn't seem like the kind of person to even have enemies. So the detectives had no choice but to check the phone from which Lindsay got the mysterious call in the first place. It turned out that the phone used to make that call to Lindsay was a burner phone purchased under a fake name in Vancouver several months before Lindsay's attack. This confirmed premeditation. Someone had been planning the harrowing attack on Lindsay for quite a while. Eerily, the phone was only used once after the purchase to make that fateful call to Lindsay. The investigators also found out that the phone had been deactivated after the murder and hadn't been used since then. Cell phone pings also showed that the phone had made the journey from Vancouver to Saanich on a ferry. The police speculated that the phone was bought as part of the murder plan and was then trashed after the deed was done. It was also revealed that the name the client gave to Lindsay was fake. Next, the investigators looked at the house itself, the company it was registered to, and all of that. And that's when they found something peculiar. The house that Lindsay was showing to her clients was located on a street known as D'Souza Place, which was a cul-de-sac of 4 houses, and the fateful house was on the outer edge of that cul-de-sac. See, D'Souza Place was named after a man named Joe D'Souza, and he turned out to be a friend and business acquaintance of Shirley Zylo, Jason's mom. If you remember, Jason's family had a well-known real estate business, so they knew everyone in the field. And now, the detectives were suspicious that the very house that Jason urged Lindsay to show to her clients, even though she was apprehensive, turned out to be a friend's property. This information immediately shifted the focus of the investigation, and now detectives honed in on Jason and the Zylo family. Even though Jason's version of events was confirmed by witness statements, some things just didn't make sense to the police. Like, why would Jason arrive late at the house when he knew that his girlfriend was uncomfortable about the new client? He should have offered to drive Lindsay straight to the showing after their lunch date. Also, another very weird thing was that the police noticed the fact that Jason made a beeline for the master bedroom as soon as his friend opened the door. Why did he do that? How did Jason know that this was where Lindsay would be found? In most cases, people usually scour the entire house before finding the victim, but Jason went straight to the place where his girlfriend was found murdered. Jason and his friend were questioned almost right after Lindsay's murder. He was cooperative with the police and even passed a polygraph test, but he refused to hand over a DNA sample. The investigators were literally stumped. It also didn't help that they couldn't find the murder weapon, so the investigation was dying down very quickly. That was until someone came forward with some very interesting information, and it had to do with Lindsay's relationship with Jason. That person was none other than Lindsay's dad, Jeff. He told the detectives that Lindsay was contemplating breaking up with Jason because he was jealous, possessive, and overbearing. But it got worse. Following a visit to her dad in Calgary in December of 2007, Lindsay confided in him about, quote, seeing something she shouldn't have. Now, we don't know what Lindsay saw, and neither does Jeff, but almost 2 months in, Lindsay was now targeted and lost her life. To this day, no one knows who the mysterious caller was and how they managed to orchestrate and execute an entire murder plan in less than 15 minutes. But there are several theories that law enforcement, netizens, and even the general public have come up with. The first theory is a targeted hit. Lindsay's murder, judging by the professional nature that it was carried out in, such as no fingerprints, no DNA, no clues, looks like the work of a professional hitman. It's believed that someone who personally or intimately knew Lindsay, her work, and her schedule had hired a hit on her, and the clients were there to carry out this dirty job. Even though this theory is believable, there's still a huge plot hole. Why would a professional hitman who doesn't even know who Lindsay is attack her over 40 times? I know it's morbid, but wouldn't a firearm or something long range have been better for a hired hit? And the nature of Lindsay's wounds and the number of times that she was attacked suggests this was a crime of passion. Someone deliberately chose a very personal and hands-on method to end Lindsay's life. Theory number 2 is a bit wild, but it involves illegal substances, trafficking rings, and ratting people out. Remember the trip that Lindsay made to Calgary in December of 2007? Well, it was revealed that right after Lindsay left, a large-scale drug bust was held in Calgary in January. Many shady people and drug dealers were arrested, including Erickson Lopez de la Alcazar, who was a big name in the illegal drug ring. But what does any of this have to do with Lindsay? Well, phone records show that on this trip to Calgary, Lindsay contacted a friend of her ex-boyfriend. The friend was actually a relative of Erickson. We don't know what that call was about, but shortly after that call, illegal rings were busted, people were arrested, and a couple months later, Lindsay lost her life. It was theorized that Lindsay ratted out some shady people as a police informant. So Lindsay's murder was planned by a drug cartel for revenge, because this drug bust was the biggest in Alberta, and people lost millions and millions of dollars. So was it a cartel revenge plot? Did Lindsay lose her life for being a police informant? Well, the lead investigators in Lindsay's case believe otherwise. They've looked into this possibility, but it was immediately struck out. It just didn't make sense. Why would Lindsay want to get involved with something like this? And again, the nature of Lindsay's attack was personal. Now, sure, ratting people out to investigators can turn sour really quick, but there was no evidence to support this, and the detectives also found no association of Lindsay with these illegal drug rings. But the next theory is quite interesting. This involves Lindsay's boyfriend, Jason, and his mom, Shirley. Jeff, Lindsay's dad, has come forward with a lot of reservations about Jason. First, he thought it was strange that Jason was still in the car when he clearly saw the mysterious man at the front door. Jeff believes that Jason should have done something, even if only making his presence known. Also, moving his car away from the house doesn't make sense either. To top this off, there's the whole running straight to the master bedroom thing. And last, that fake Spanish accent that Lindsay heard on the phone call that day. Surprisingly, this accent resurfaced again in a weird way. See, a while later, after Lindsay's murder, one of her friends, Nikki, got a call from an unknown number in the middle of the night. She answered, and the woman on the other end was speaking in a really weird, fake, made-up Spanish accent, very similar to what Lindsay had heard. The call went on for a bit before it got disconnected, and Nikki didn't remember what the caller even talked about. But when she tried calling the number back, well, at the 30th attempt, it was finally answered by none other than Shirley, Jason's mom. Nikki was so confused and weirded out. Why would Lindsay's boyfriend's mom call her? And how did she even have her number? Shirley brushed it off, saying that she was trying to reach her personal assistant, whose name is also Nikki, but the lines got mixed up. When Nikki asked how Shirley got her number, she assumed that Jason must have added it to her phone. But later, Shirley flat out denied that this call ever even happened, and we don't know whether the investigators have looked into this possibility or not. This left one major question. Was the person closest to Lindsay responsible for her tragic passing. We don't know for sure, but you can't say that it doesn't sound unsettling. But the worst part of this whole case is that, at this point, no one has been charged in Lindsay's murder. Now, with the evidence we've seen so far, I feel like there's one pretty obvious suspect. But without proper evidence, police can't charge the man or the woman who were likely behind this attack. The only real lead police had regarding the woman who was at the scene of the crime was her unusually colored dress. Investigators spent a great deal of time trying to track down the dress or the woman wearing it, but nothing ever came from this search, and they were forced to call it off. Lindsay's dad, Jeff, has not given up hope, though, and there's actually been some fairly recent progress in the case, meaning that all hope is certainly not lost, and we're getting closer now than ever in getting this case solved. One of the biggest helpers in the investigation has been Jeff, who has a website set up for Lindsay's murder, which includes an online forum with updates and theories on the case. And it's this website that led to a very suspicious post regarding Lindsay's murder. In August of 2007, almost 9 years following Lindsay's attack, a comment surfaced on the forums that simply read, "I killed Lindsay, and stupid cops will never prove it." Now, this could have been for attention or for something else, and it may be from the killers themselves, but the truth is, we have no clue. But it was an interesting post nonetheless. As recently as 2021, the Saanich Police Department, joined by the FBI, announced that they have new leads in Lindsay's case thanks to advancements in DNA analysis and other technology. But the details are under wraps at the moment. My best guess is that back when the case first unfolded, the detectives must have found something that was left behind in the house, something with some small shred of DNA attached to it. As I'm sure we all know, more recently detectives have been able to use genetic genealogy to solve heaps of previously unsolved murder investigations, and this case may be no different. But genetic genealogy can take a very, very long time, but all hope is not lost. We're just waiting to hear what investigators plan on pursuing as the next step. Jeff and the rest of Lindsay's loved ones have suffered a lot in the past decade and a half, and it's high time that they got answers for their daughter's very haunting murder. Personally, I can't help but feel that for Lindsay, for Jeff, and everyone close to her, justice is just around the corner. Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of True Crime Stories. I wanted to give a special thank you to a couple channel members, including Hey Boo Boo Butters and Ghost of Me 13. If you also want to become a member of the channel, you gain access to new videos sometimes days or weeks before they're uploaded to the public, and it is a great way to help the channel and support us. I really appreciate all of you guys that have decided to do that. And if you want to join, you can click that big join button below the video, or find a link down in the description. And don't forget, True Crime Stories t-shirts are also now available. You can grab one of those from the link down in the description as well. But as always, if you enjoyed this video, check out this other interesting case I covered, and don't forget to subscribe. It's totally free and just keeps you up to date with all my future videos. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.